Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Gulf Today on News X World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. A senior Hamas delegation arrives in Cairo to meet Egyptian intelligence and mediator countries, including Qatar and the United States. Discussions are set to focus on advancing the second stage of US President Donald Trump's Gaza plan. Israel says Hamas violated the Gaza ceasefire, sending a member into Israeli-held territory to attack its soldiers. In response, Israeli forces confirm they killed 5 senior Hamas members. Gaza Civil Defense says that Israeli airstrikes killed 21 people in Gaza after firing across the yellow line. This marks one of the deadliest days since the US brokered ceasefire took place. A Houthi court in Yemen sentences 17 people to death for allegedly spying for Israel, the United States and Saudi Arabia. The lawyer says defendants face execution by the firing squad but may appeal. A large fire erupts near Haifa's Ain Nayam neighborhood in Israel, sending thick smoke into homes. 9 firefighting teams are battling the blaze. No injuries have been reported as of now. Oman signs an agreement with Airbus to design, manufacture and launch its first communications satellite. The project aims to enhance the nation's communication system and develop capacities in space and future technologies. US President Donald Trump says that his Ukraine peace proposal is not final. This comes as US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has left for Geneva to hold discussions on the Ukraine peace plan. French President Emmanuel Macron warns that the Ukraine plan needs deterrence. Meanwhile, United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer stresses that Ukraine must decide matters affecting its own future. Let's track the top story that we are tracking here on News X World in this bulletin. A delegation of senior Hamas officials has arrived in Cairo to meet Egyptian intelligence amid rising tensions in the Gaza Strip. They are expected to hold talks with representatives from Egypt, Qatar and the United States. The meetings aim to discuss ways to contain the recent escalation of hostilities. Officials will also review plans for the next stage of US President Donald Trump's initiatives for Gaza's future. Diplomats say the discussions could play a key role in reducing violence and advancing mediation efforts in the region. I now like to welcome Sasha Mashta, who's a political commentator who's joining us live from Jerusalem. A very warm welcome to you and thank you for joining us, Mr. Mashta. Now, how do you see these political developments shaping and what do you expect? Do we see or should we see a breakthrough from these talks?
So we have to take everything that's coming out from these talks, first of all, with a grain of salt. Of course, Hamas has no good faith in these negotiations, and there's been quite contradicting reports coming out of the region. Meanwhile, Hamas has said that they're looking at the ceasefire ending while sending a delegation to Cairo to discuss phase 2. So there's a lot of contradictions coming out at the moment with Hamas. On one side, it appears that the ceasefire is breaking down. On the other hand, they are negotiating the continuation. This is, of course, games by Hamas to continue violating the ceasefire while pretending and acting as if they are in good faith and wish to see the continuation of the Trump plan. Of course, Israel does not desire to go back to war. Israel has constantly been enforcing the ceasefire and responding to grave violations by Hamas. But ultimately, this is going to be up to whether the mediators are able to pressure Hamas to continue following the Trump peace plan.
Right. Now, given that the peace plan that Trump has put forward is under review, what kind of changes are being accepted from either side?
So, first, one of the most important clauses, or one of the most important aspects of the agreement, is the ISF, the International Stabilization Force. This force, comprised of different moderate Arab nations sending troops into Gaza, is going to be crucial in disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip to allow for the continuation of the plan and for Gaza to be rebuilt and de-radicalized. Of course, this depends on nations, Arab nations, actually desiring and wanting to send in their own soldiers, which understandably is an issue for many because people and countries don't want to send in their troops to fight Hamas. So the question of Hamas disarmament is the most important going forward. It's going to determine the success of this ceasefire, and of course Israel continues to call for the ISF to be formed and enter Gaza after it's already been approved in the UN. It's already been given the green light. Now countries are just gonna need to be willing to do so, and it's also gonna depend on what leverage Trump has over certain countries because, of course, most nations out of goodwill would not want to risk their soldiers, understandably again. And hopefully the IDF won't have to go back in and do this job, and we'll see the ISF coming into Gaza and being in charge of the disarmament.
Do you see Trump conceding to the international pressure that's being mounted on him for supporting Israel's efforts so far?
No, I think that Trump has been consistent throughout not only this administration, but his past administration and his staunch support for Israel. But at the same time, Trump's goals are aligned with those of Israel and the region. The new Middle East that both Trump, Israel, even the Saudis want to create depends on radical groups, first and foremost Hamas and the Iranian axis actually falling. And Hamas disarmament is key to reaching a new Middle East with the expansion of the Abraham Accords, with rebuilding Gaza, and with allowing a future in this Middle East without radical ideologies that hold their citizens hostages and bring chaos and conflict to the region. So Trump has been firm on this. Trump has been firm that Hamas must disarm, and we expect that one way or another, this is what will end up happening. There's no choice.
All right, Sasha, I request you to stay on as I have some more news to give our viewers now. In Gaza, the civil defense says that Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 21 people and wounded more than 80. The first strike hit a car in Gaza's crowded Rimal neighborhood, setting it on fire. Additional airstrikes targeted homes in Deir al-Balah, Nusrat camps, and the western Gaza city, killing at least 15 more. Israel said the strikes were in response to a gunman entering Israeli-held territory, calling it a ceasefire violation. However, Hamas rejected the claim, calling it an excuse to kill as tensions test a fragile truce agreed over 6 weeks ago. Let's bring back Sasha into the discussion. Sasha, now clearly the ceasefire and the truce deal that was struck upon is not being respected as we would expect it to. How do you see the developments shaping up going forward from here? Do we see any sort of retaliation from the Gaza side?
So, first of all, this in fact was a retaliation to Hamas's violation of the ceasefire, where they sent in gunmen to attack IDF soldiers. This is a grave, a serious violation of the ceasefire, and one of the keys to this Trump plan is that no violation of the ceasefire on behalf of Hamas will be unresponded to. And this is one of the main issues that Israel has been under for the past years regarding ceasefires and agreements, that we learned that a ceasefire cannot be unilateral. One side cannot abide by it alone. It requires two parties. And of course, Hamas, with this grave violation of the ceasefire, was responded to. Israel targeted senior Hamas officials in response. And of course, the 21 civilian count coming out by the Gaza ministry, which of course is run by Hamas, does not distinguish between civilians and fighters. So everything must be taken with a grain of salt and understood that Hamas is still running these numbers, and Hamas, the same Hamas that is unable to find 3 bodies of hostages that they've held for 2 years, can come up with numbers for civilian deaths instantly. I mean, the logic doesn't make sense there. And we hope that the civilians of Gaza will be free from Hamas's rule and Hamas's brutality. And in fact, that the whole region can be free of Hamas. And going forward, we hope that the disarmament will happen, and it must happen. And there's really no choice for Israel, for the region.
All right. Thank you, Sasha, for joining us here on NewsX World. I thank you for sharing your insights and opinion with us. And with that, viewers, let's move on to the next big story that we are tracking here. Now, Israeli protesters have gathered in Tel Aviv to demand the Israeli government to appoint a committee to initiate a status inquiry on the events of October 7. Protesters have stated that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government refuses to be held accountable for the October 7 attack and are protesting Netanyahu's wish to choose the members of the committee, claiming that it will be given an unfair advantage. Meanwhile, some protesters have responded. Let's listen in.
I'm here tonight because I want to have some answer what happened in this day, why nobody came to help, why the soldiers didn't come and they help my daughter. She was alive until noon, and I don't have no answer. I don't know what happened in this day, and not before and not after. I don't know, and I want answer. I want the truth. I want that all the people that was involved to give me some answer. I want answer. It's very natural. It's very simple for me. It's the minimum that Mama can get from the country about this horrible day.
It should be an objective committee. It should be a committee who will really find out how come that we had such a failure, such a crisis. And this is what we really demand. All the families of the hostages, all the families of the people who really lost their life in the 7th of October. All of them together do demand to have such a national inquiry committee.
And now, viewers, let's move on. A court controlled by Yemen's Houthi rebels has sentenced 17 people to death on charges of spying. According to reports, the court in the capital Sana'a had sentenced the 17 individuals in cases related to espionage cells within a spy network affiliated with the American, Israeli, and Saudi intelligence. Charges against the defendants included colluding with foreign governments deemed hostile to Yemen during 2024-25 period and passing sensitive information to intelligence officers from those countries, as well as Israel's Mossad. They were also accused of helping recruit Yemenis, allegedly contributing to attacks on military security and civilian sites that resulted in dozens of deaths and large-scale infrastructure damage. Let's welcome Yossi Kapawasser, who's joining us live from Tel Aviv. He's an security expert. I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir, for joining us. Now, how do you see, first of all, the developments shaping up with the 17 individuals that have been now sentenced to death over these? I mean, that is usually the case when espionage is concerned. Foreign nations are not very considerate to these kind of charges.
Well, yes, it's very natural for us to listen, to hear about these cases. We hear it often, quite often in Iran, when they arrest all kinds of people and blame them for espionage. The same with the Yemenites, because the pride of the Yemenites was hit severely with the strikes that Israel conducted in Yemen during the war. So they have to explain it by catching all kinds of alleged spies and executing them and so on and so forth. I'm not sure if this is the right people, and they usually do that regardless of whether it's the right people or not. In the trial they held, there was no defense for the people that were accused of those crimes. So it's hard to say that this is really the people that were behind it. And stop shooting missiles in our direction. So I'm wondering if there's going to be enough pressure to convince them to give up on executing those 17 people that God knows if they were at all involved in anything.
Any action that we can expect from either Israel, US or Saudi Arabia to prevent the execution of these 17?
Well, I don't think that Israel and Saudi Arabia are going to do anything out of the ordinary in order to prevent that. There are very few countries that can have any leverage over over the Houthis, and these countries that have the leverage are not in touch with Israel or with Saudi Arabia. So I don't know if there's going to be enough power to convince the Yemenites not to execute them.
But if mediation fails to save these 17, there's going to be a clear escalation in the confrontations with Yemen. What kind of scenario do we see now shaping up finally if these people are not saved?
Well, I can think of more pressure being put on Yemen and economic pressure and so on and so forth. But also on the Houthis in Yemen. But I doubt if this is going to have an impact on them. They tend to ignore all these pressures, so I'm not sure that this is going to stop them from moving forward with this strange execution of their own people.
All right, Mr. Kapawasa, thank you for joining us and sharing your insights with us here on NewsX World. Of course, we'll keep tracking developments that will be shaping up in connection to that case. With that, we move on. Now, Oman has signed a landmark agreement with Airbus to design, manufacture, and launch the Sultanate's first communications satellite. The move marks a significant step forward in Oman's efforts to strengthen its communications infrastructure and expand its capabilities in space and future technologies. The satellite is expected to enhance connectivity across the country, supporting both civilian and governmental communications needs. Airbus is set to lead the development and launch operations. Officials emphasize that the project will also help build local expertise in satellite technology, positioning Oman as a growing player in the regional space sector. And let's shift our focus now, viewers, and tell you that the United States has put forward a 28-point draft peace plan to end the war in Ukraine. According to the plan, Ukraine would have to recognize Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk as de facto Russian territory. Ukrainian forces would also withdraw from parts of the eastern Donetsk region they currently control, creating a demilitarized buffer zone, and front lines in the Kherson and Zaporizhia would be frozen. US President Donald Trump says that his Ukraine peace plan is not the final offer and they will have to end the war one way or another. Let's first listen in to what US President Donald Trump had to say.
Is this your final offer to Ukraine?
No, not my part. No, we'd like to get the peace. It should have happened a long time ago. The Ukraine war with Russia should have never happened. If I were president, it never would have happened. We're trying to get it ended. One way or the other, we have to get it ended.
Meanwhile, according to the US State Department, Ukrainian and American officials led by Marco Rubio are going to meet in Geneva to discuss the Ukraine peace plan, and security officials from France, Britain and Germany are also expected to join them in Geneva. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that the 28-point plan proposal for peace in Ukraine that emerged was authored by Washington and that it is based on inputs from the Russian side. But previous and ongoing efforts from Ukraine were also considered. However, U.S. lawmakers, including some in President Donald Trump's Republican Party, have criticized his plan for ending the war in Ukraine, which heeds to several hardline Russian demands. And with that, we now shift our focus to news from Europe, where European and other Western leaders, while criticizing the U.S. proposed peace plan, emphasized that it is a basis for talks to end the Russia-Ukraine war, but it still needs additional work to eke out a better deal for Kyiv before a Thursday deadline. French President Emmanuel Macron says that Russia would betray its promise and come back if Ukraine is forced to reduce its army as proposed under Donald Trump's plan. The president of France was also among European leaders meeting at the G20 summit in South Africa, who have rushed back at the one-sided plan by Trump that aims to end the war in Ukraine. Let's listen into what President Macron had to say.
On voit bien qu'il y a des éléments sur la limitation du format de l'armée ukrainienne, donc de sa propre souveraineté. On sait que s'il n'y a pas les éléments de la dissuasion, les Russes reviendront et trahiront leurs promesses. Nous l'avons vu à plusieurs reprises, et en particulier en ce qui concerne l'Ukraine en février 2022. Donc nous voulons la paix. Je pense qu'elle doit commencer par un cessez-le-feu. Et ça aussi, c'est des choses qu'on peut essayer d'avoir à court terme. Je constate que depuis mars, où le président Zelensky a donné son accord sur le cessez-le-feu, c'est la Russie qui a toujours dit non.
And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also emphasized the importance of a just and lasting peace, stressing that matters for Ukraine are always to be determined by Ukraine. Meanwhile, leaders of 8 Nordic and Baltic nations have pledged to continue supplying arms to Ukraine and expressed support for solutions that respect Ukraine's sovereignty, aiming for greater security and stability in Europe. And that's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.